She looked like any college student, backpack, hoodie, tired eyes. But when both pilots collapsed at 37,000 feet and death whispered through poisoned air, her hands gripped the controls with lethal precision. The Black Hawks didn't come to rescue her. They came to salute their own. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. Sarah Mitchell adjusted her worn backpack as she stood in the security line at JFK International Airport. Her faded NYU hoodie and ripped jeans made her look like any other college student heading home for spring break. At 26, she could easily pass for a junior in college. Her blonde hair was tied in a messy bun, and she clutched a coffee cup in one hand while scrolling through her phone with the other. The TSA officer barely glanced at her boarding pass. Flight 892 to Los Angeles? Yes, sir, Sarah replied with a tired smile. Can't wait to see some sunshine. He waved her through without a second thought. What he didn't know, what nobody in that airport could possibly know, was that Sarah Mitchell wasn't really a student. She was Captain Sarah Viper Mitchell, United States Air Force, with over 3,000 flight hours in F-16 Fighting Falcons and C-17 Globemasters. She had flown combat missions in 3 countries and had spent the last 8 months working undercover in New York, providing tactical intelligence support for a classified counterterrorism operation. Her mission had ended successfully 2 days ago. Now she was flying home to Edwards Air Force Base in California for debriefing. Gate 47 was already crowded when Sarah arrived. Flight 892 was a Boeing 767, a popular morning route that would take just over 5 hours. She found a seat near the windows and pulled out a textbook on psychology, part of her cover story. To anyone watching, she appeared to be cramming for finals. Around her, the gate filled with typical travelers. A businessman typed furiously on his laptop. A young couple argued quietly about their seating arrangement. An elderly woman knitted peacefully. Several families with small children tried to keep their kids entertained. When boarding began, Sarah moved through the jet bridge with the crowd. The gate agent scanned her mobile pass. Enjoy your flight, miss? Inside the aircraft, a flight attendant with bright red lipstick smiled at her. Welcome aboard. Sarah nodded politely and made her way back to seat 34A, a window seat near the rear of the plane. She stuffed her backpack under the seat in front of her and buckled in. A middle-aged man in a business suit soon settled into the middle seat beside her. Morning, he said briefly before immediately opening his tablet. The aisle seat was taken by a woman in her 30s who smiled warmly. First time to LA? Sarah shook her head. No, I'm actually from there. Just visiting home for a week. Oh, how nice. What do you study? Psychology, Sarah replied smoothly, the lie coming easily after months of practice. Final year. It's been brutal. The woman laughed sympathetically. I remember those days. Good luck with your studies. As the final passengers boarded and flight attendants began their safety demonstration, Sarah's eyes casually scanned the cabin, exits, emergency equipment locations, crew positions. Years of training made it automatic. She noticed the lead flight attendant, a woman in her 50s with confident movements and a name tag reading Jennifer. There was also a younger male attendant and another woman working the rear galley. The captain's voice came over the intercom, professional and calm. Good morning, folks. This is Captain Robert Harris, along with First Officer Michelle Chen. We're looking at smooth flying today with clear skies most of the way. Flight time to Los Angeles will be approximately 5 hours and 20 minutes. We'll be cruising at 37,000 feet once we reach altitude. Sit back, relax, and we'll have you in sunny California before you know it. The Boeing 767 pushed back from the gate right on schedule. 8:15 a.m. Sarah felt the familiar sensation of the aircraft turning, the tug pushing it backward, then the engines spooling up as they began taxiing toward the runway. She watched through the window as they joined the queue of departing flights. JFK was busy as always, with planes taking off every minute. Finally, it was their turn. The engines roared to full power. The acceleration pushed everyone back into their seats. Sarah felt the nose wheel lift off first, then the main gear, and suddenly they were airborne, climbing steeply over Queens and heading west. The city fell away below them, the buildings, the bridges, the rivers, all growing smaller as they climbed through scattered clouds. Sarah had flown hundreds of times, both as pilot and passenger, but she never got tired of that moment when gravity released its grip and the ground dropped away. The seatbelt sign stayed on for the first 15 minutes as they climbed through 20,000 feet, then 30,000, finally leveling off at their assigned cruise altitude of 37,000 feet. The sky outside was brilliant blue, with a carpet of white clouds far below. The tone chimed and the seatbelt sign went dark. Captain Harris's voice returned. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached our cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign is now off. Feel free to move about the cabin. Flight attendants will be coming through shortly with beverage service." Sarah accepted a cup of coffee when the cart reached her row. The woman in the aisle seat ordered orange juice and started chatting with the flight attendant about the weather in LA. Everything was perfectly routine. The steady drone of the engines created white noise. Passengers settled into their activities, reading, watching movies on seatback screens, working on laptops, or sleeping. Sarah pulled out her psychology textbook but didn't really read it. Her mind was already shifting into post-mission mode, thinking about the debriefing sessions waiting for her at Edwards, about reconnecting with her squadron, about what assignment might come next. 2 hours into the flight, they were somewhere over Pennsylvania. Sarah noticed the businessman beside her had fallen asleep, his tablet dark on the tray table. The woman in the aisle seat was absorbed in a novel. Then Sarah felt it, a subtle change in the engine note. It was barely perceptible, just a slight shift in pitch that most passengers would never notice. But Sarah's trained ear picked it up immediately. Her eyes went to the window. The engines looked normal from what she could see. No visible smoke or damage. A moment later the aircraft banked slightly left. It could have been a routine course correction, but something about the movement felt off. Too sharp. Too sudden. Sarah's internal alert system activated. She kept her expression neutral, but her awareness expanded, her training kicking in automatically. Then the cockpit door opened. Jennifer, the senior flight attendant, emerged quickly. Her professional smile was in place, but Sarah could read the tension in her shoulders, the tightness around her eyes. She moved down the aisle toward the rear galley, walking fast but not running. Sarah watched in the reflection of her window as Jennifer spoke urgently with the male flight attendant near the rear. Though she couldn't hear the words over the engine noise, the body language was clear. Something was wrong in the cockpit. Both attendants returned forward together. Jennifer picked up the intercom handset near the forward galley. "Ladies and gentlemen, the captain has turned on the fasten seatbelt sign. We're expecting some turbulence ahead, so please return to your seats and make sure your seatbelts are securely fastened." But there was no turbulence. The air outside was smooth as glass. Sarah could see for miles in every direction. Perfect flying conditions. The woman beside her sighed and closed her book. "I hate turbulence." Sarah made a non-committal sound but said nothing. Her mind was racing, processing possibilities. Why would they make a false turbulence announcement? What would cause that? Medical emergency in the cockpit? System malfunction? Something bad enough that they needed passengers seated and secured, but not bad enough yet to create panic? 5 minutes passed. The aircraft continued flying normally, but Sarah noticed subtle changes. Minor adjustments in heading, slight variations in altitude. Small things that suggested the pilots were dealing with something. Then Jennifer appeared again, this time moving through the cabin with barely controlled urgency. She stopped at several rows, leaning down to speak quietly with passengers. Sarah watched her approach a man in a business suit 3 rows ahead. "Excuse me, sir, do you have any pilot training or aviation experience?" The man looked startled. "No, what? What's wrong?" Jennifer forced a calm smile. "Just a precaution, sir." "Thank you." She continued down the aisle, asking the same question. Each negative response made her move faster, her professional composure cracking slightly. Sarah's heart rate increased. They were looking for a pilot. That meant something had happened to the crew in the cockpit. Both pilots? One pilot? How bad was it? When Jennifer reached their row, she looked at all 3 of them with the same urgent question. "Excuse me, do any of you have pilot training or aviation experience?" The businessman shook his head, confused. "No, what's happening?" The woman in the aisle seat also shook her head, fear creeping into her voice. "No, what? Is something wrong?" Jennifer's eyes moved to Sarah. For just a moment, their gazes locked. Sarah made a split-second decision. Years of training emphasized maintaining cover under all circumstances. But she also recognized genuine crisis. People's lives were at stake. She kept her voice low and calm. "I need to know what's happening in the cockpit before I can help." Jennifer's eyes widened slightly. She leaned closer, speaking barely above a whisper. "The captain collapsed. Possible heart attack. The first officer is trying to fly the plane, but she's also feeling sick. We need help. Do you know how to fly?" Sarah met her eyes steadily. "I'm a pilot. Military trained. Take me to the cockpit right now." Jennifer's professional mask cracked for just a moment, relief flooding her face. She nodded quickly. "Follow me. Please." Sarah unbuckled and stood. The woman in the aisle seat grabbed her arm. Wait, you're a student? How do you know how to fly planes? Sarah looked at her briefly, then gave a small, tight smile. I'm not exactly what I seem. Stay calm, help keep others calm, and everything will be okay. Before anyone could respond, she was moving up the aisle behind Jennifer. Her entire demeanor shifted. The slouching student posture straightened, the casual walk became purposeful strides, the uncertain expression replaced by focused intensity. Several passengers noticed the change, confusion spreading across their faces. At the cockpit door, Jennifer punched in the security code. The lock clicked and she pulled it open. The scene inside made Sarah's breath catch. Captain Harris was slumped forward in the left seat, unconscious, his head against the control column. His face was gray, sweat soaking his uniform shirt. The first officer, Michelle Chen, was gripping the controls with white knuckles, her face pale and glistening with sweat. Her eyes were unfocused, her movements sluggish. Multiple warning lights illuminated the instrument panel. The autopilot was disengaged. The aircraft was being hand-flown, but barely maintaining altitude and heading. Sarah moved immediately to the jump seat behind the center console, her eyes scanning the instruments with practiced efficiency. Altimeter showing 36,800 feet, they'd lost 200 feet. Airspeed 480 knots, slightly fast. Heading 265 degrees. Multiple system warnings flashing. Who are you? Michelle's voice was weak, slurred. We need a doctor, not... She broke off, a wave of nausea clearly hitting her. Her grip on the controls wavered. Sarah's voice came out sharp and commanding, cutting through the confusion. First Officer Chin, my name is Captain Sarah Mitchell, United States Air Force. I have over 3,000 flight hours including heavy transport aircraft and emergency operations. I need you to focus and give me a situation report right now. The authority in her tone cut through Michelle's panic. She responded automatically, her pilot training overriding her confusion. Captain Harris collapsed about 10 minutes ago. Chest pain, then he passed out. I called for help but couldn't revive him. I declared an emergency. Then I started feeling sick too, dizzy, nauseous. It's getting worse. Autopilot won't engage. Multiple system warnings. ATC has us vectoring toward Cleveland Hopkins for emergency landing, but... Her voice trailed off and she swayed in her seat. Sarah was already processing with the rapid analytical thinking her training had developed. Both pilots sick. Progressive symptoms. Sweet smell? She sniffed the air. Yes, there it was. Faint but distinct. Carbon monoxide, she said sharply. Contaminated air supply. We need oxygen immediately. She reached up and pulled down the emergency oxygen mask above the captain's seat, placing it over Harris's face and turning the flow to maximum. Then she grabbed Michelle's mask. Put this on. Full flow. Right now. Michelle fumbled with the mask and Sarah helped her secure it, watching as the first officer's breathing steadied slightly. Then Sarah pulled down her own mask and switched it to emergency flow. Pure oxygen flooded her lungs and she immediately felt clearer. She hadn't even realized she was starting to feel the effects herself. Jennifer stood frozen in the doorway. Sarah turned to her. I need a medical professional to check the captain immediately. Also check if any passengers are showing similar symptoms. Dizziness, nausea, headache. And I need someone to check the air quality sensors in the equipment bay. Move fast but don't create panic. Jennifer nodded and disappeared. Sarah reached for the radio transmit button. Cleveland Center, this is November 892 heavy, emergency traffic. The response was immediate. November 892 Cleveland Center, go ahead. Cleveland Center, November 892. Be advised we have additional qualified personnel now in the cockpit. I am Captain Sarah Mitchell, United States Air Force, assuming flight control duties. Both original flight crew incapacitated by suspected carbon monoxide poisoning. Request immediate vectors to nearest suitable airport and full emergency response. Medical teams should prepare for possible toxic exposure incident. There was a brief pause, then, November 892 copy all. Understand Air Force Captain now assuming control. Nearest suitable airport is Cleveland Hopkins, currently 35 miles northeast of your position. Descend immediately to flight level 200. Turn right heading 090. Emergency equipment is being scrambled. Say souls on board and fuel remaining. Sarah checked the fuel gauges quickly. Cleveland Center, 892 heavy. Fuel approximately 2 hours 30 minutes. Souls on board. She glanced at Jennifer, who had returned with a man in casual clothes carrying a medical bag. 267 including crew, Jennifer supplied. 267 souls on board, Sarah transmitted. Roger. 892. You are cleared direct Cleveland Hopkins. Emergency is declared. All other traffic is being cleared from your path. Sarah's hands found the controls. She spoke to Michelle, who was looking slightly better with the oxygen. First Officer Chen, I'm taking the controls. Acknowledge. Michelle's hands came off the yoke immediately. Controls released. I have the controls, Sarah confirmed, feeling the Boeing respond to her touch. The man with the medical bag was Dr. James Porter, a cardiologist from Boston who happened to be on the flight. He was examining Captain Harris, checking his pulse and breathing. He's alive but critical. Possible cardiac event, but could also be from the toxic exposure. He needs advanced care immediately. Sarah was already flying the aircraft, initiating a controlled descent while turning toward Cleveland. She adjusted power and pitch, watching the vertical speed indicator show a smooth 1,500 feet per minute descent. The Boeing 767 was much larger than the fighters she usually flew, but the principles were the same. The controls responded smoothly to her inputs, and she felt that familiar connection, that sense of becoming one with the machine, that all truly experienced pilots knew. Michelle, she said through the oxygen mask intercom, I need you to stay with me. Can you help with radios and instruments? The first officer nodded, her color improving. Yes, the oxygen is helping. I can assist. Good. We're going to get through this together. The next 15 minutes were a controlled chaos of procedures and coordination. Sarah flew the aircraft with smooth precision, descending through 30,000 feet while maintaining course toward Cleveland. Her hands made constant small adjustments, power, pitch, trim, keeping everything stable while managing the emergency. Jennifer returned with her report. 3 passengers are feeling mild symptoms, dizziness and nausea. Air quality sensors show elevated carbon monoxide throughout the aircraft, highest concentration in the cockpit. It appears to be coming from the bleed air system. We've isolated the contaminated source and switched to emergency air supply. Sarah nodded, still flying. Good work. Make sure those affected passengers get oxygen if available. And prepare the cabin for possible emergency landing, briefing, securing loose items, the full procedure. Already on it, Jennifer replied, her professional competence fully engaged now that there was clear leadership. The radio crackled. November 892 Cleveland Center. Be advised, we are coordinating with Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Due to the nature of your emergency and the presence of military personnel, they are scrambling support assets. 2 HH-60 Pave Hawk helicopters will rendezvous with your position to provide escort and emergency support capability. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Pave Hawks, Air Force rescue helicopters. Someone in the military command structure had run the passenger manifest and flagged her presence. They knew who she was. Cleveland Center, 892 Heavy, copy all. Understand Air Force rescue assets inbound. She pushed the concern aside. Right now, the only thing that mattered was getting this aircraft on the ground safely. Through 20,000 feet now. Sarah requested and received clearance to continue descent to 10,000 feet. The weather was clear, visibility unlimited. She could see Cleveland in the distance, the city sprawling along Lake Erie's shoreline. Michelle was helping now, calling out altitudes and airspeeds, her voice stronger with the oxygen clearing the contamination from her system. 892, descend to 5,000 feet. Turn left heading 040. You are 15 miles from the airport. Expect vectors for ILS approach runway 24 left. Runway is clear, emergency equipment standing by. 892 descending to 5,000, left to 040, Sarah acknowledged. Through the windscreen, Cleveland Hopkins International Airport was clearly visible. Sarah could see the parallel runways, the terminal buildings, and already, even from this distance, the flashing lights of emergency vehicles positioning along the taxiways. Then 2 dark shapes appeared off the left wing. The Pave Hawk helicopters slid into formation on either side of the Boeing 767, maintaining perfect position about 300 feet away. They were HH-60s, the Air Force's combat search and rescue variant, bristling with rescue equipment and medical capabilities. The lead helicopter pilot came up on the emergency frequency. November 892, this is Rescue 41 Flight Lead. We have you in sight and are maintaining escort position. You're looking good. Runway is clear, emergency equipment ready. Understand you have Air Force pilot flying the aircraft. Sarah keyed the radio. Rescue 41 affirmative. This is Captain Sarah Mitchell, Air Force. Currently providing emergency assistance. Aircraft is stable and we are continuing approach. There was a brief pause. When the response came, the pilot's voice carried unmistakable respect. Copy that, Captain Mitchell. We have full confidence. You're doing great. We're here if you need anything. In the passenger cabin, people were starting to understand something extraordinary was happening. The military helicopter escort was visible through the windows, an unmistakable sign this was far more than a routine diversion. Flight attendants moved through the aisles, preparing everyone for landing. But conversations buzzed with confusion and speculation. The woman from seat 34A was staring out the window at the helicopters, her mind racing. The student, who had been sitting beside her, was now apparently flying the plane with military support? Sarah continued the approach with total focus. She had landed far more challenging aircraft in far worse conditions. Fighters on carriers, transports in combat zones, helicopters in mountain storms. But she also knew that 267 lives depended on her doing this perfectly. 892, turn left heading 360. Maintain 5000 until established on the localizer. You are cleared for ILS approach runway 24 left. Winds 220 at 8 knots. 892, left to 360, maintaining 5000, cleared ILS 24 left. Sarah intercepted the localizer, the radio beam that would guide them laterally to the runway centerline. The instruments showed them tracking perfectly. Michelle, landing gear down. The first officer operated the controls. 3 green lights illuminated on the panel, nose gear, left main, right main. All down and locked. Gear down, 3 green, Michelle confirmed. Flaps 10. The flaps extended with a smooth whir. Sarah felt the aircraft slow and the nose pitch up slightly as the wing generated more lift. They were at 4,000 feet now, descending at 700 feet per minute, tracking down the invisible radio beam toward the runway. The Pave Hawks maintained their escort positions, the pilots flying with the precision that marked elite military aviators. 892, you are 3 miles from the threshold. Contact Tower 118.4. Sarah switched frequencies. Cleveland Tower, November 892 heavy on ILS 24 left, emergency aircraft. 892 Cleveland Tower. You are cleared to land runway 24 left. Winds 220 at 8. Emergency equipment is standing by. 892, cleared to land 24 left. 3,000 feet. The runway was clearly visible now, the white approach lights forming a path through the sky. Emergency vehicles lined both sides, fire trucks, ambulances, rescue equipment, all with lights flashing. Flaps 20. More flaps extended. The aircraft slowed to approach speed, 145 knots. 2,000 feet. Sarah's eyes moved constantly between the windscreen and the instruments, cross-checking altitude, airspeed, descent rate, runway alignment. Everything was perfect. Michelle called out altitudes. 1,000 feet. 500, 400. The runway threshold passed beneath them. Sarah pulled the power back and began the flare, that practiced movement of bringing the nose up slightly to arrest the descent and set the aircraft up for touchdown. 300, 200, 100. The main landing gear kissed the runway with barely a bump, a smooth touchdown that would have made any airline pilot proud. Sarah immediately deployed the spoilers and thrust reversers, feeling the deceleration as she applied the brakes. The Boeing 767 slowed from 140 knots to 60, then 40, then taxi speed. Emergency vehicles paced them on either side as they rolled down the runway. 892, turn left next taxiway. Follow the emergency vehicles to the isolated parking area. Sarah turned off the runway where a ground marshal was waiting. She followed his signals to a remote parking area away from the terminal, surrounded by emergency equipment. As soon as she set the parking brake and shut down the engines, the cockpit seemed to explode with activity. Emergency medical personnel rushed in to attend to Captain Harris. Dr. Porter was already briefing them on his condition as they prepared to move him. Michelle removed her oxygen mask, breathing hard. That was incredible. Thank you. You saved all of us. Sarah removed her own mask and managed a tired smile. You did great, Michelle. You kept it together when it mattered. The door behind them opened and a colonel in Air Force flight suit entered, the rescue patch clearly visible. He saluted sharply. Captain Mitchell. Colonel David Reynolds, 88th Air Base Wing. Hell of a job bringing that bird down. When the emergency declaration came through and we saw your name on the manifest, Command made the decision to provide full support. We're treating this as a potential security incident until we know if this was accident or sabotage. Sarah returned the salute. Thank you, sir. Just glad everyone's safe. The deplaning took 30 minutes. Passengers filed off into buses that would take them to the terminal, many of them staring at Sarah with new awareness as military personnel treated her with obvious deference. The woman from seat 34A stopped at the cockpit door, looking at Sarah with wide eyes. You really weren't just a student, were you? Sarah met her gaze. I'm a student, in a way. Just not the kind you thought. I'm glad we all made it down safely. The woman shook her head in amazement. You saved our lives. All of us. Thank you doesn't seem like enough. Just doing what I was trained for, Sarah replied quietly. Captain Harris was rushed to the Cleveland Clinic in critical but stable condition. Michelle and the 3 affected passengers received treatment for carbon monoxide exposure. All were expected to make full recoveries. Sarah spent the next 3 hours being debriefed by federal air marshals, NTSB investigators, and Air Force intelligence officers. She provided detailed technical accounts of everything she had observed and experienced: the timeline, the symptoms, the system failures, her assessment and response. Several days later, back at Edwards Air Force Base, Sarah received word that preliminary findings pointed to maintenance error rather than sabotage. An improperly serviced engine seal had allowed carbon monoxide contamination of the bleed air system, a tragic reminder that aviation safety depended on countless small decisions. She also learned she would receive the Airman's Medal, the Air Force's highest peacetime award for heroism, though the ceremony would be private to protect her classified status. Major General Patricia Coleman, commander of Air Force Special Operations, personally called her. Captain Mitchell, what you did up there was extraordinary. But I won't lie, the visibility from this incident means your deep cover work is finished. Too many people know your face now. We need to talk about your next assignment. Sarah accepted a position at the Air Force Weapons School at Nellis, training the next generation of combat pilots. It wasn't operational flying, but it was important work, and she could still fly regularly. Years later, the story of Flight 892 became something of a legend in aviation circles. The military pilot who emerged from student cover to save hundreds of lives. The details got embellished and mythologized, as such stories always do. Sarah rarely spoke about it herself, uncomfortable with the attention. But in quiet moments, she remembered that morning over Pennsylvania when her 2 worlds had collided, when the cover identity she'd maintained so carefully had fallen away to reveal the Air Force officer underneath. The Pave Hawk helicopters that had escorted her landing represented more than just military support. They were a reminder that she was part of something larger than herself. A community of professionals who trained for impossible situations and held each other to the highest standards. She had been just a student that morning, until an emergency call made the Black Hawks reveal her name. And in that moment, Captain Sarah Viper Mitchell had done exactly what she trained her entire career to do: save lives no matter the cost.